It reminds me, and of course I'm just looking at my own experience here, but it reminds me so much of the many times where I would be dissatisfied with the experience I'm having and find so many things to blame. Like, oh, if only this was different, if only that was different, if only people were like this and not like that, if only there was this system and not that system. And sooner or later, that all collapses and you're just faced with yourself in the mirror. And you realize, holy shit, this is really between me and me. In one way, it's like, I gotta grow up. And there's so many, what we might just call blocks, assumptions and beliefs that we feel are so permanent, that we feel are our identity. Like, how often have we said, or maybe we've heard other people say, it's just the way that I am. I'm lazy. That's just the way that I am. I had an idea today to, do a course, a video, or write. What was the title? How I became a productive, lazy person. Because I understand that narrative. I understand that story of being a lazy person. But then I also look at my way of being, and it's amazing how productive I can be. Even though in one way, I'm a lazy person. But it's interesting because in looking at my own experience, there's been so many conclusions I've had about the type of person that I am, which was a projection of limitation. I'm not good at this. That's not for me. Yada, yada. And how much I've proven those things to be absolutely wrong. Case in point, as an example, I went through this time where I was absolutely convinced that I was not a morning person, that I was a night person. And I, sleep in till 9, 10 o'clock because I'm not a morning person. And I was convinced of that. I was just convinced that some people like this and some people like that, and this is how I am. I'm just not a morning person. And then with the journey and certain changes that I've made, mostly food that I put in my body, I've transformed into a morning person. It's wild. And in one way, an extreme morning person, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, going to work, sometimes 1:30 in the morning, just really early and ready to go. And then going to bed early. I didn't think I was that kind of person, but it changed. And so this is something to consider, because this is really interesting, because as it relates to the deep spiritual discovery, in one way, it points us to see the vast emptiness. And in the vast emptiness, things are incredibly moldable. Like, it's not solid. And so much of what seems to be solid is simply held together by beliefs we have that aren't true. They're just projections of reality that look solid. Put it this way, and this is pointing to the deep spiritual insight. We think that we are experiencing a life that is happening out there. Even a self that we see is a self that's out there. But what you're actually experiencing is what you put there with your perception. Like, you don't see what's going on in the world. You see the story you're telling about what's going on in the world. Beyond your story, that story isn't really there. But do you see this? We get so convinced that because our mind is spinning a narrative about something we see, we assume that it's actually out there. This is creating a reality that's not really there. In reality, it's empty. And this goes right along with who you are, right? You have these thoughts about who I am. And what are those thoughts? They're just thoughts. They're projections. They're stories. And we think that they exist beyond our narrative. Here's an example. I was talking with somebody yesterday, and this was just a curious moment. And they told me something. They said, I can't do X, Y, Z. I can't do it. And it struck me, mostly because it reminded me of myself, of course. But it's like, wait, you can't do it? Like you literally can't? Did you try? No. And I said, just out of curiosity, would you agree that it would be more accurate to say you choose not to? I'm just curious if you would agree with that. And this took us on a conversation that was quite interesting. The ways that we use language that reinforce a limitation that's not really there. Because to say, in this context, that I can't, it was like there was an external force that was making a decision on your behalf, rather than an internal force or a consciousness that was honest enough that says, I choose not to. Do you see what happens when you say that I choose? You really have to look at yourself. Like, yeah, you choose. There's something in you that chooses that. Do you want to get curious about why, or do you just want to keep saying that it's beyond your control? Then you don't ever have to look at it. There's 10,000 of these examples. Like, it blows my mind how much this is going on without being aware that it's going on. And it's constantly projecting this reality of limitation that's not reality at all. But you know what it is? It's safe and comfortable. It's safe and comfortable to believe that you are powerless. It's safe and comfortable to believe that the world is against you, then you are the one that's creating it all. Because if you are the one that's creating it all, you have to take radical responsibility for what you're creating. And if you see what you're creating and there's a disconnect from what's sincere in your heart, that's not fun to see. Do you remember when I told you in the beginning of this talk, something to do with heart-based humans that are ready for change? Do you see why it's called that? Do you see why it could be super irritating if somebody just wanted a nice spiritual talk to remind them that all is well and they don't have to be honest with themselves? They don't have to really look at the raw fire of their humanity. This is more beautiful to me than avoiding all that shit. It's more beautiful to me to call myself out on my own bullshit. Because even though it might take some time, it's like it always circles back around, and I find a deeper courage and strength to not only do the hard things, but to move through them. And this applies to every single area of life. Does it not? What are those primary areas? Your spiritual life? Yeah, it's hard to sit and be radically honest with yourself, to see what's deeply true. Relationships? My goodness, the foundation of depth and connection in relationships is through a extraordinary vulnerability, which is hard, through wealth or your form of service. It can be extraordinarily difficult to show up when you don't want to, or to show up in ways that are required, but invite you to look at your inadequacies. Health. It's difficult to be healthy until you realize how important it is and how much the alternative is just not an option. Much like all of these things, right? It's way more difficult in the beginning, but to move through it, you find an ease. And I would almost say that it's not so much that it becomes easier, maybe in appearances it does, but more so it's like you've turned toward the difficulty and you've discovered a courage and a devotion that disregards the difficulty and just does it anyway.